everyone. So I had an interesting interaction on Facebook last week and it's been on my mind, and so I thought I'd just talk about it here. So it was in a local Facebook group where a homeowner needed to move and she shared her listing and a realtor's contact information to set up showings. The house was priced very reasonably for the size and the area, but there's this one guy, and we'll call him Steve. He started trolling the post and he commented, "Have you considered how outrageous the price is?" So anyway, Steve is a younger millennial and he was hijacking this girl's post and trying to guilt her over the list price. And the way he was going about it did not sit well with me. I was not going to not say anything. It's already a tough market for buyers and sellers without having to deal with internet bullying on top of that. And I wasn't the first person to tell him he was being unrealistic and unnecessarily rude. He was very dismissive of the others, telling him he was out of touch with the market and to maybe calm down a little bit. But I did tell him that the pricing wasn't outrageous at all, and I actually brought some numbers into discussion. One, to back up what I was saying, and two, to give him some perspective. So I wasn't just saying you're wrong, I actually brought data and evidence into it. The house was priced at $182 per square foot, whereas the average price per square foot in our county and neighboring areas for that type of home and the age of the home, it's been in the 200 and higher range for years per square foot. But Steve was not having this, though. He threw out some bogus numbers about affordability statistics to make himself appear knowledgeable, which ironically I called him out for it being false and misleading, because I actually found the article he was trying to reference, and he was either intentionally being misleading or he didn't even finish reading the title all the way through to figure out that it was looking at a sliver of the overall market and one specific demographic in that study. Yet he was trying to portray this as a representation for every homeowner across the entire state. So I called that out for being wrong. And then he challenged me to, quote, "look at the median income and the average price of a home in the state and report back." He also told me, "You do not want to get into this with me." Oh, sweet summer child. Bless your heart, Steve. Turns out the joke was on him, because not only is this my career, but real estate and the housing market, particularly the number side of it, just so happens to also be an autistic special interest of mine. So I was like, buckle up, Buttercup, we're getting into this. I didn't actually say that to him, but I really wanted to. But my husband and I did have a laugh about it. I was pleased to report back to Steve that as a licensed mortgage professional who works with the numbers every day in real estate finance, I had, in fact, recently helped several first-time homebuyers who make below 80% of the area median income buy their first homes in our county and Salt Lake County, even within the last 6 months, even with interest rates being higher. We didn't have to jump through weird hoops to get them qualified, and they didn't have large amounts saved for down payment. They didn't have any help from family, so nothing like that. But yet, even though they made, like I said, 80% of the AMI, we were able to help them get into homes they qualified for, and they each have thanked me several times over for helping them buy their first home. So yes, Steve, I actually do have real-world experience with this. I also correctly identified Steve's main pain point. I'll have to assume that I was correct, because when I called him out, he suddenly became speechless and went completely radio silent on the entire post after I surmised what his issue was and presented all the facts on the matter. So if I'm wrong, let me know, but I think your silence was kind of telling. What it came down to was this: he was mad that this home wasn't priced like a starter home. That was it. And let me be clear, this home was not a starter home. It was a 6-bed, 5-bath, 4,500 square foot home at the end of a cul-de-sac, neighboring the lake, with a direct trail down to the lake from their driveway, and a high-end desirable HOA subdivision, and it had a price tag to match. And here he was, mad that it wasn't priced as cheaply as a starter home, because this wasn't a home that he could afford. But here's the thing: a home like this wasn't considered a starter home in my grandparents' generation, It wasn't considered a starter home in my parents' generation when they were buying their first home in the early 80s. It wasn't a starter home by post-recession standards when my older siblings were buying their homes, and it wasn't considered a starter home when my husband and I bought our first home in 2014. This house was a next step or trade-up home. So how it works is that the majority of homeowners first buy starter homes, let it appreciate, and then use the gained equity to trade up to the larger home. It's considered affordable for the stage of home it is intended for and for the demographic of buyers who already have equity and who are looking at buying these types of homes. And fun fact, I actually checked the listing yesterday when I was clearing out my tabs, just going through, exiting out a bunch, and I saw that, and it was under contract. So congratulations to the seller, and there you go, Steve. If it were not affordable, no one would have bought it. So this brought up another talking point. That's a good one. The word affordable is entirely relative and different from person to person. Are there some families who might have six-figure dual incomes and could buy this home as their first home? Sure, because that could be affordable to them in that situation. For most middle-class Utahns, it's probably only affordable if you already have the equity from a previous home to throw down and roll towards this new home purchase. Steve was adamant that a home in this price range wasn't affordable for anyone. But if that were the case, as I said earlier, then no one anywhere in Utah would buy it or homes similar to it, and they would all just be sitting vacant for years. But we know that's not the case. And these types of homes do still sell consistently across the state, even with interest rates above 6%. Yes, the number of inventory of homes are down, which means the total number sold is down compared to past years. And yes, they may sit on the market for more than 3 weeks. We kind of got spoiled with that during the pandemic where things would be snatched up in less than 2 days. But that doesn't mean that the homes never sell. Someone is finding them affordable. Again, it's under contract. I also brought to his attention that affordable housing is not the same as housing affordability. So let me be clear. Utah does have a legitimate and severe problem with the lack of affordable housing, which is to mean government subsidized housing specifically for low-income families and earners. We are in desperate need of affordable housing. However, housing affordability, as an economic term, is a completely different facet of the housing market and has become a talking point lately due to rising interest rates coupled with rising appreciation, but it is not due to rising appreciation alone that this is an issue, nor is it because homes are being priced at a fair market value, even if that value seems high to subjective spectators. Also, the housing market has its own set of checks and balances. Steve, shown through his verbal attacks towards the original poster, thinks that sellers are being greedy and setting these outrageously high prices, but in fact, prices are not determined by sellers, but by appraisals. Prior to a listing, a seller's realtor makes a best guess estimate of market value for the asking price based on what other nearby properties appear to be selling for, and a buyer's agent is free to accept or negotiate the listing price on behalf of the buyer. If a realtor sets the price way too high, an appraisal is meant to quickly correct that. Appraisers have to look up and use the sold prices for properties that were recently purchased in that vicinity as comparable properties, or also called comps, to determine the market value of a home for sale with the similar features in that area. What a home originally listed at does not determine its value, so no, values are not being dictated willy-nilly by whatever price the sellers please. If the price is too high, then the appraisal, which looks at data from previous sales, comes in too low, then the buyer would have to come up with the difference in cash in order to justify the purchase price to the lender. A majority of the time, though, the buyer would rather the seller come down to match the appraised value. Keep in mind, in most cases, the lender is the one forking over the cash for the purchase, and they don't want to overpay for their investment either. That's why it's the buyer's lender who is responsible for hiring an appraiser to ensure that they're getting a fair deal and not overpaying for the property. And in order to keep it completely fair and impartial, lenders are not allowed to handpick which appraiser goes out and does the valuation. There cannot be any favoritism by law, so lenders hire an appraisal management company that has its own internal process to determine which appraiser gets assigned to the property. So before the actual appraisal report is submitted, both the lender and the realtor are effectively blind and will have no clue which appraiser is going to the property and what their own professional opinion of value will be. This is done so that no one can influence the appraiser to inflate or deflate the value prior to the appraisal being completed. Buyers will then have a chance to negotiate the purchase price if the sales price doesn't match the appraised value, and when it's all said and done, the sold amount gets recorded so that the property can be used as a comp for other nearby properties in the future. So this is how property values are actually measured, and for this particular one that Steve was critiquing, their asking price was in line with its comps. Okay, but let's take the other side. Let's say the seller doesn't want to be greedy and they lowball their own house and list it for far below market value so it can be affordable to everyone. What happens then? There is an entire psychology of sales that goes into this, and studies have actually shown us what will happen. The results will be one of two things. One, realtors and buyers will know it's underpriced because they have to be savvy in this market, so they'll know it's a bargain and they'll try to snatch it up, except they won't be the only ones to figure this out from looking at comps. So this will create a bidding war with multiple offers, which will drive up the price anyway until it's near or on par with fair market value. The second possible outcome could be that it will turn a lot of potential buyers off. But why would a low price turn someone off? Studies have shown that if an otherwise desirable product or service is priced too low, lower than its demand or perceived value, then it will actually cause consumers to wonder, what's wrong with this? There's got to be something wrong with it if they're trying to offload it for so little, which will hinder most buyers from pulling the trigger and buying it. Imagine if you saw a classifieds ad for a 2-year-old Lambo or Porsche GT3 selling for like $30,000, keeping in mind that a 2022 Porsche 911 GT3 starts at over $160,000 and the cheapest Lamborghini for the year starts at $230,000. What would be your first thought about the quality of what you were buying? Most people would assume there's something terribly wrong with it, like the engine shot. They'll think the price is too good to be true, that there's an undisclosed gotcha somewhere in the house or the fine print, or that's a straight up scam. So most people who care about these products will pass on buying the lowest priced one, or it'll sit on the market forever until someone is gutsy enough to take a gamble on it. Now, investors will probably be the exception to this housing metaphor here because they're used to taking on greater risks and damages. But then that will also perpetuate the problem that's bugging Steve because it decreases the inventory for home ownership and it forces another family to rent for the landlord's profit instead of being able to buy the property outright themselves. Pricing homes too low doesn't do a lot of good for buyers either. So to recap on the scenario, the sellers had the home for a few years, their value increased, they gained equity, and now they're selling with the assumed intent of rolling that equity towards their new home. They also have to purchase a home in this market. We don't know the reason why they're moving or where they're moving to, but that's kind of besides the point. What it came down to is that Steve was mad. He took the seller's listing price personally. He attempted to hijack their post and to lash out at the sellers and the housing market and basically accused them of robbing people by listing their home for what they did. To be fair to him as a renter in this economy, he does have a lot to be frustrated about, but his anger and frustrations here were entirely misplaced. I told him he could be mad that Congress and their lobbying corporations have allowed wage stagnation to continue unchecked since the 70s, that he could be mad that cost of living increases weren't keeping pace with inflation. That's totally valid. You are valid in that, Steve. Let's be mad. Wage stagnation, anger. Totally cool. You could be mad that the pace of new construction floundered following the Great Recession, which led to our current housing shortage that hasn't been keeping pace with annual household formations, which in turn has caused values to rise sharply over the last 6 years. He can be frustrated that builders are choosing to build more trade-up homes instead of starter homes that aren't just apartments for rent. Or how he could be mad at the lie of trickle-down economics and how corporations are making record profits and paying their C-level executives more than ever while raising prices and blaming it on inflation when they're directly responsible for that inflation and exacerbating the problem. We can be mad that our communities are filled with not in my backyard mentality, and our leaders refuse to pass zoning and building permits, that would allow for government subsidized housing for those who truly cannot afford housing assistance. All of those are completely valid reasons to be frustrated and mad. But being mad at someone for selling their home at fair market value, that ain't it, Chief. It's a proven fact that home equity appreciation is a reliable hedge against yearly inflation because the home's value also rises every year more often than not, and it has functioned that way for over 80 years. So either he was confused about how homes are actually priced, or he didn't see how silly it was to be upset that people have equity and are using it as the investment that it is towards their next home purchase, or he doesn't see how silly it is to be upset that someone's selling their home at a fair price in this economy. I know I keep saying a fair price, but it really was. I priced out 3 other homes for sale in the neighborhood, like within the range that appraisers read for comps. And the others were priced at $216 per square foot, $249 per square foot, and $276 per square foot, while this house was priced at $182 per square foot. And it was really nice quality too, and still in line with other comps. So yeah, far from outrageous or greedy considering the size of the home and the area it was in, and not surprised it's under contract at all. Nice house. Anyway, all that to say, I get that there are many people who are frustrated, people just like Steve, and those frustrations are valid, especially in this economy, but how he expressed those frustrations was not okay. He was bullying and guilting the seller, and we don't know why they're moving. Maybe because of a death in the family, or maybe because someone got laid off and they can no longer afford to live there, or they're relocating for a new job, or they need to be closer to family, or maybe they have a disabled family member and they need a better layout and floor plan. So we don't know, and moving is already hard enough mentally, emotionally, physically, for all parties involved without someone who pretends that they know the housing market, berating you and trolling you because they feel entitled to demand that you price your home for hundreds of thousands less than its market value just so they feel better about it. Not to mention the dude was being extremely condescending and rude, talking down to me when he didn't have any correct information going for him when I'm a professional in this very field of expertise with real-world experience. Dunning-Kruger effect in full force, I guess. So really, all I wanted to jump on here and say is just be kind. It really is as simple as that. Almost no one will be able to afford every home in any price range. And if it's not in your price range, just move on. If you think it's priced too high, don't attack the seller. If you're the buyer and you think it's priced too high, let the appraiser sort it out and hire a realtor who's great at negotiating. And if you're not even in the market to submit an offer, then especially don't lash out at the seller. Be more productive with your time and focus your efforts where you can actually make change happen. Talk to your leaders and encourage more diverse housing options and zoning, especially affordable housing. Maybe instead you could talk to me or someone else in your area who works in real estate finance to find out what you can qualify for. And if not now, do it to create a strategy to figure out how you can get into a home in the future so you can also start gaining equity. Let's just stop perpetuating harmful ideas that everyone who sells today is a greedy villain or trying to become a landlord or just to screw people over. That is not the case at all, especially for the majority of people in your own community. Okay, they also want to invest in the community, but they also gotta look out for themselves, especially if they're buying a house in this economy as well. Because think about it, they're already giving up their low rate from earlier to get one that's double or triple what they previously had. So just be kind. Anyway, I don't know if this will ruffle some feathers by posting this, or if viewers will misconstrue this to think that I'm not sympathetic to renters or to those who truly can't afford to break into this housing market, because that's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that there are valid reasons to be upset at this market and this economy, some of which I mentioned earlier. And by the way, that is far from an exclusive and exhausted list of reasons. And maybe I made a different demographic mad that I called trickle-down economics a lie, so who knows. But being mad that the housing price is just are what they are and turning out and lashing at the sellers when it's priced fairly based on our system of checks and balances and current supply and demand, that's not the way to go about it. You're misdirecting your frustrations, and that's the truth. So Steve, even though we didn't get to continue our conversation, I hope that you actually did gain something from what I mentioned earlier. And I hope you remember to choose kindness, and I hope you actually do find your way to break into the housing market, and I hope everyone does someday. Until then, take care. I got halfway through recording and I realized I didn't have my dang microphone. So now I gotta do it all over again.